Hi, this is Grace Dickinson, and this is my presentation on pop culture of the 1990s. Starting with fashion trends. In the 90s, we saw a large shift for everyday fashion, kind of civilian fashion, to street style, which is very popular still today, and you honestly could go outside and look at what people are wearing, and it's very similar and definitely inspired by a lot of the things from the 90s, such as flannels slash plaid pattern skirts, oversized clothing, which, little side note on that, there were a lot of smaller clothing very popular at the time, very small clothing, but I can't put pictures of those, so I just left that out. Just a thought though. Cargo pants still very popular today. Bomber jackets, as you can see on the right. Fuzzy bucket hats were popular, endorsed by celebrities like Rihanna. And a lot of shows were inspiring these fashion choices, like Jennifer Aniston in Friends inspired population of things like the slip dresses and overalls. Air Jordans and Converse became very popular during this time, as did the slap bracelet, which I wouldn't consider fashion, but technically it counts. So there it is. Speaking of inventions, in the 90s, there was a large shift towards technological inventions in more technology-centered life with mobile cell phones like the Nokia 1011. 1994, you can see it on the right. It's very brick-like, but it's a phone. A very large one, but it could send messages, and this was the invention of text messaging happened in 1992, which really changed the way that we communicate today and probably for the rest of forever, because no one's ever going to be texting their friends with emails anytime soon. Text messaging really revolutionized and streamlined communication. Gaming systems like Nintendo 64 and Sony PlayStation, Tamagotchi pets, recreational technology like that was invented. DVDs, Google got rid of the age of using an encyclopedia for literally everything. You could Google it and it was right there. Although Google really didn't hit its stride till the 2000s, it's still significant and was created in the 90s, so I put it in here. Not all inventions were technology. Furbies were not technology, but they were invented. I don't think they should have been invented, but there it is. I hate them, but they were invented in 1998. Sports were very significant at this time. They had a lot of impacts on society, these sporting moments did. The Dream Team was created for in the NBA, which had Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, people like that. And this was significant because they won the Barcelona Olympic gold in 1992, and it really asserted America's worldwide dominance over the sport of basketball, which we honestly still have today. Magic Johnson got HIV, and he was the first celebrity to really get it. And it was a huge epidemic at the time, forced him into retirement, and it really caused people to think about this disease and how to prevent it. There was the Atlanta Olympic game bombing in 1996, which tragically killed 2 and injured over 100. Tiger Woods, black man, was able to make his name and break records in golf in 1997. And arguably one of the biggest sports upsets in history was Douglas versus Tyson. Buster Douglas beat Mike Tyson, who was the sitting heavyweight champion of the world in 1990. And Douglas was an underdog, 42-1, and Tyson had never been beat, so it caused a very large upset in the sporting world. You can see that photographed on the right there. In music, it was a very unique time in that Black artists were truly able to make their voices heard and attain a level of fame they previously couldn't. Hip-hop, alternative grunge, boy bands, and girl bands were very popular, and R&B saw a comeback. The first couple songs there are hip-hop, and then we have some alternative and also some boy and girl bands there at the bottom, which NSYNC, TLC, Destiny's Child, Backstreet Boys, Spice Girls. And there was also important to note that Black women were able to really have a place in music with bands like the Spice Girls and then Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey. Film and television. The film and television of the 90s is characterized by a lot of sitcoms and romantic comedies, very easily to digest content, and animated TV shows, things like that. So the first couple there on the left are the most popular sitcoms of the time, often featured young coming-of-age leads or a group of friends who are experiencing life. The rom-coms, this is often referred to as the golden age of rom-coms, with hits like Pretty Women, You've Got Mail, 10 Things I Hate About You. The Simpsons, King of the Hill, those kind of cartoons were created, very lightweight content that you didn't have to be too invested to understand it, which is part of the reason all these shows were so popular. But there was still heavier content like ER, X-Files, Law & Order dramas, which set the stage for the dramas of the 2000s and 2010s, the medical dramas, the law dramas like Criminal Minds and Grey's Anatomy. Literature of this time often was social commentary, and a lot of these would get movie adaptations. Like The Giver has a movie, but it's a social commentary on conformity. American Psycho is commentary on toxic masculinity, also has a movie. Fight Club also has a movie and is also social commentary on kind of the role of masculinity and showing emotion and toxic masculinity, things like that. Jurassic Park, wildly successful movie adaptations. English Patient is a more serious kind of sad drama, which also has movie adaptation. Secret History does not, but Game of Thrones does. And Bridget Jones's Diary is on here because it kind of opened up the stage for the type of books that would be popularized in 2000s and 2010s of just telling one's life story and life lessons, things you learn along the way, people you meet, things like that. There was definitely a lot to say with gender roles in the 90s because there was the third wave of feminism taking place, and led by women like Hillary Clinton, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Dianne Feinstein. And for the first time, there's also women in the music industry and business industries, specifically Black women, who are able to become successful and make their voices heard and be able to inspire younger girls, which honestly was a lot of the 90s, was inspiring the younger generation. At least that's what I picked up from my research. So young girls during this time were easier to access through TV because role model or shows often cast young, intelligent female feminist leads often to be role models for these young girls, and it really actually was successful. And 4 women were elected to U.S. Senate during this time. Family and Medical Leave Act was passed, which made it legal for you to fire a mom taking maternity leave. Female participation in the workplace grew, and male participation decreased. Take Your Daughter to Work Day was established in 1992, and this was mainly to inspire more girls, young women, to join the workforce and see that there's a life outside being a housewife, and that's not the only option. Those against feminist movement would just use hurtful names and stereotypes to attempt to discredit the accomplishments of successful women and encourage them to just stay home. And sadly, the feminist movement at this time often did exclude women of color, as it mostly benefited white women. But another thing to note is that the Riot Grrrl subculture mixed punk rock and feminism, which was a large reason for many young girls joining the feminist movement. And as you can see on the left, it also inspired the idea of girl power, which was a very popular idea during the 90s. Economically, America did struggle for the first year of the 90s, but by the time Bill Clinton took office, it took off due to his Clintonomics. It actually caused the longest economic expansion in American history. During his second term, unemployment was just at 4%, which is very low. And the country was honestly thriving economically. However, not everyone got to benefit from this. Like I said, women of color were often excluded, as there definitely was a pay gap for white women too, as they made around like 74 cents for every dollar a white man made, but Black women only made 64.1, and Latino women made just half of a white man's dollar. The number of Black-owned insurance, real estate, and financial companies quadrupled in the 90s, and for the first time in history, Black people began to be recognized and represented in pop culture, with high-profile celebrities listed below, were able to have a platform and spread their ideas and stand up for those who didn't have a voice, which was something you honestly hadn't seen before, and it would really set the stage for the 2000s and 2010s, where Black artists were able to have a voice and make a difference in the world. That's just a video on the 90s and everyday life, but we'll skip that because we don't have time. And there's my